uses at RHCT included the parking of private sanitation vehicles and other vehicles, and other outdoor storage uses. RHCT sees about 60,000 TEU, which stands for 20-foot equivalent containers, brought into the port annually, and ships about half of them via barge to a facility in Port Newark. While the barge moves are an important component of the operations and help reduce the vehicle miles traveled by trucks both in the surrounding neighborhoods and on the New York City highways and bridges, this service does today require a significant public subsidy, which exceeds the rent paid by RHCT on the property. In order to generate enough revenue to exceed the cost of the subsidy, the port would need to increase the throughput of commodities that travel through the site. Today, the ability to increase the throughput is limited not by lack of space, which can be seen by all the excess space on campus, but rather by aging infrastructure, the water depth of the berth, the lack of nearby rail connections, and the lack of other port-supported infrastructure, which is available near the ports of Newark and Elizabeth. Because of these limitations, RHCT mostly serves smaller and medium-sized cargo ships and is unlikely to attract any larger ships to call. Instead, the potential for growth is likely to come from attracting more of these smaller and medium-sized ships that currently call at Philadelphia and Wilmington. At the start of the BMT vision plan process, it was identified that understanding the market demand for the continued use of the property for maritime and port operations was key to forming an appropriate vision for the site. There were varying opinions expressed by task force members during the early meetings. Some felt that there was no demand for continued use of the site as a container port, and cited as evidence the fact that the current operations are heavily subsidized. Others felt that the entire 122-acre site should be dedicated to port and maritime industrial uses, and cited the example of the recent investments down the road to build out the offshore wind port at the SBMT, the South Florida Marine Terminal, as further proof. Still, others believed that retaining a container port and maritime industrial space at BMT was a key policy initiative for New York City. However, they were skeptical that there was adequate demand to fill the whole site of maritime uses that would generate a financial or economic return that would justify the significant infrastructure investments required to bring the whole site into a state of good repair. As proof, they noted, as mentioned earlier, that currently only about half the site, approximately 60 acres, is dedicated towards maritime-related uses, and these uses are supported with a significant amount of operational subsidy. As the task force went on, several sessions focused on this question about the correct size and orientation of the port component of this project. Moffett and Nickel, the retained maritime consultants, conducted an in-depth market study and interviews with similarly sized port operators around the world. This study and these interviews were focused on understanding the outlook for freight and passenger activity at New York City. Based on the results of the Moffett and Nickel studies, it was determined that there was adequate market support for a 60-acre port with two basic components. First, a container operation occupying the vast majority of the Pier 10 and its uplands, which is about half the site. This operation could be made operationally self-sufficient through a combination of several factors. Public investment in the piers to bring them to a state of repair, long-term operating agreements with the port operator in order to incentivize private investment in the topside, and increasing the throughput through densification that could be accommodated by this mix of public and private investment. The second component would be the opportunity to be used to house a number of uses, including a potential expansion of container unit uses, construction staging, general bulk cargo, and blue highway uses. Although BMT would remain a niche port, these improvements would allow the port to attract a larger portion of the current commodities it serves today, making it financially viable. A key component of this flex maritime area was the demolition of the existing outdated crumbling finger piers, two of which, Pier 9A and 9B, have already been condemned and out of service since late 2023, and replacing them with a modern, flexible, marginal pier with a large berth of approximately 1,700 linear feet. The configuration of the marginal pier is driven by operational considerations as it creates several benefits, including by extending out to the channel, it obviates the need to dredge. It creates an easier berthing condition for pilots. The long berth creates a huge amount of flexibility for ship types and sizes compared to the 600 linear foot length of the existing fuel piers. And it creates ample surface area for topside storage and movement of commodities and materials, which do not typically require warehouses. This is the port plan that was ultimately incorporated into the vision plan. It was passed by a 2/3 majority of the BMT task force that was made up of local elected officials, community groups, tenant associations, and industry and affordable housing advocates. Notably, almost all of the representatives on the task force with maritime industrial experience were among those 2/3 who supported the vision. The vision plan also included a commitment to release an RFEI in the fall of 2025 to, quote, gather information on additional proposed port configurations and gauge market interest in additional maritime industrial activities at the BMT port. Although the RFEI made reference to the port size and configuration described in the vision plan, it also explicitly asked respondents for feedback regarding its configuration, both in terms of its layout and total size. The RFEI made it clear that if respondents believed that the port should be bigger, smaller, leave the finger piers in place, or should be located on a different part of the property, EDC and BMT would welcome that feedback. The RFEI was issued in October of 2025 and was distributed widely through direct emails, advertisements in trade publications, and press releases. As testament to the widespread publicity of the availability of this RFEI, over 250 individuals representing over 220 companies downloaded the RFEI. There were over 80 attendees at a site information session and a tour on October 30th, and 25 responses were submitted by the due date of December 15th. Since that time, EDC staff has been reviewing the proposals and interviewed many of the respondents to get clarification of their responses. BMTDC board members and local elected officials have been invited to review the full responses, and many have taken us up on that. Lastly, I want to clarify, this was an RFEI, not an RFP. BMTDC, the Brooklyn Marine Terminal Development Corporation, will not be using these responses to select a future operator of port facilities. Rather, the information learned from these responses is intended to provide critical information for further refining the port and could be useful in shaping a future RFP or RFPs that will be issued to select a partner. This slide lists the 25 responses received. We've broken them down into 4 categories. The RFEI encouraged a broad range of responses, including those who were interested in being the operator for the full port site, as well as those who do not have the capacity to run the full site, but are more interested in only a portion of the site, perhaps as a potential subtenant to the eventual port operator. Accordingly, 6 of the respondents indicated interest in being full port operators. Another 7 expressed interest in occupying a small portion of the site, perhaps as a tenant or full port operator. 2 respondents indicated interest in just operating the cruise terminal portion of the site. And finally, 10 firms submitted responses that were not specifically aimed at running a portion of the facility, but rather they were focused on services that they could provide to the port operator. We're going to go through each one of those proposals, but before we do, we want to summarize the key big picture takeaway from the responses. The RFEI listed 6 key objectives. This chart lists each objective on the left-hand side and the key takeaway on the right. As mentioned, the first objective was to identify potential port operators. Potential respondents. Notably, many of the responses came from some of the largest port operators in the country and in the world. Next, though the RFEI recognized port size and layout included in the vision plan, it also provided responses to propose alternatives in both size and facility. The responses showed a general concurrence that the 60-acre port size seemed appropriate. Many of them noted that the size also afforded sufficient space for future growth and through densification, rather than expanding the footprint of the site. Additionally, many of the full port operators concurred with the importance of the investment in a larger pier layout for the flex maritime portion of the site. Furthermore, they validated the focus in the vision plan on the mix of maritime uses, which included container, cruise, construction staging, and blue island. The RFEI included specific questions seeking feedback on the potential private investments economic returns from the site. Although many respondents indicated that they believe that the full port could be economically viable and expressed willingness to invest significant amounts of private investment in the site, most only provided very high-level responses and did not supply financial details. Lastly, in response to questions from the RFEI about potential interest in a linkage of the BMT site to a new Hunts Point marine terminal via the Blue Highway Airport, many respondents expressed a strong interest in such a link and indicated that it would be additive to the overall financial outlook for the site. Of the 6 respondents who were interested in being the operators of the full port, 3 of them have significant experience in running port facilities throughout the U.S. The other 3 are very experienced investing in and developing large-scale transportation infrastructure facilities focused on the movement of commodities through various modes, including not only by ship, but also trucking and air transit. This group of respondents have experience in being the master developer and navigating the public-private partnership aspect of the site. They're not port operators per se, but they each propose bringing on experienced partners to eventually run the cargo through another maritime operation. Some of the key issues that each of these 6 respondents focused on were the experience of the respondent in operating and developing a port of this size, their response to the size and layout of the port proposal and vision plan, how well they felt the port and the vision plan could accommodate future growth, the importance of the investment in a marginal pier, the importance of the Hunts Point connection, and whether they were interested in just the cargo operations or also the cruise terminal operations. Start with Carrick's. Carrick's, also known through their subsidiary known as SSA Marine, is one of the world's largest independent marine terminal operators with over 76 years of experience in the field. They are based out of Seattle and have operations throughout the U.S., Mexico, Canada, Central America, South America, and Asia. Locally, they are the operators of a facility at the Port of New York, New Jersey, and Bayonne. Other North American operations include Long Beach, Los Angeles, Seattle, Tacoma, Oakland, Jacksonville, New Orleans, Montreal, and Vancouver. Their 27 container terminals handle over 28 million TEU per year, and in addition, they operate cruise terminals in Vancouver, Seattle, Miami, Galveston, and San Diego, amongst others. Their response indicated support for the 60-acre-sized port, emphasized the importance of the marginal pier, proposed the ability to grow operations through densification on site, and approved of the potential connection to Hunts Point, noting that the resilience of such a connection could provide during emergencies. Finally, given their vast experience in both cargo and cruise operations, they expressed the desire to run both the port facility and the cruise terminal. Ports America. Ports America is a leading U.S. marine terminal operator that handles 19 million TEU annually at their container ports, in addition to almost 7 million passengers annually in their cruise terminals. They have 33 ports and 76 locations throughout the U.S., including Los Angeles, Baltimore, Miami, Tampa, New Orleans, Tacoma, and Houston. Locally, they have facilities in Port Newark and currently operate both the Brooklyn and Manhattan cruise terminals. In addition, they operate cruise terminals in Los Angeles, Miami, Seattle, Norfolk, and several other North American locations. Their response indicated support for the 60-acre-sized port, described the marginal pier as the most logical solution to modernize the site, and planned the ability to grow operations through densification on site. Though they noted that it may add project complexity, they also felt that the potential connection to the Hunts Point facility could be extremely advantageous. Finally, like Carrick's, given their vast experience in both cargo and cruise operations, they expressed a desire to run both the port facility and the cruise terminal. RHCT, or Red Container Terminal, is the current operator of the container and cargo port at BMT and has been there since 2011. In addition to the facility at BMT, RHCT also operates a 30-acre facility in Port Newark and is the co-developer of the South Brooklyn Marine Terminal site in Sunset Park, which is currently being converted into an offshore wind port together with Equinor, a multinational Norwegian energy company. Over the last decade plus, RHCT has created deep ties within the local community, supporting many local community building organizations. For this submission, RHCT has proposed partnering with Seaboard Marine, a publicly traded corporation founded in 1983, Seaboard is a premier ocean transportation company that provides regular service between North America, the Caribbean, Central, and Southern America. It operates a fleet of 25 vessels, serving over 40 ports in 25 countries. Currently, they provide weekly service into BMT, carrying produce, seafood, clothing, medicine, and other commodities back and forth from Brooklyn to Latin America and Europe. Both RHCT and Seaboard expressed the importance of investing in the electrification of the port and broadening the highway network. Their responses indicated support for the 60-acre-sized port, referred to the creation of a marginal pier as a, quote, critical investment, and proposed the ability to grow operations through densification on site. This respondent felt that the connection to Hunts Point was so important that they included a Hunts Point produce wholesaler, E. Armada, as a partner in their plans. Other partners include D&M Lumber, a long-term tenant of BMT, formerly at Pier 8 and currently at Pier 11, Ionic Porter, a precast concrete manufacturing company specializing in delivering to construction sites and coastal resiliency projects around the city, and Tilcon, another current tenant at RFCT, that is a leading supplier of crushed stone, sand, and aggregate that is brought into the site by barge. It also included Dutch X, who provides mid and last mile delivery services using the largest fleet of electric bikes in the country. Finally, the proposed team does not have any specific cruise terminal operations experience. However, they noted that if the RFP for cruise and cargo are combined into one, they would bring on another partner's cruise experience. But they do not think that combining both facilities would be necessary. Prologis. As mentioned before, the next three respondents have not been directly involved in port operations, but rather have significant experience in executing on complex transportation logistics infrastructure projects that involve public-private partnerships. The first one, Prologis, is an owner, operator, and developer of industrial and logistics real estate with a 1.3 billion square foot portfolio in 20 countries, including throughout the U.S., Rotterdam, and Spain. Prologis is the largest owner of industrial space supporting port infrastructure globally, including warehousing, cold chain, container staging, fleet electrification, and last mile logistics. Prologis has a significant footprint in the New York region, with over 40 million square feet and $20 billion in assets. At BMT, they propose playing the role of enabling maritime use through durable electrified infrastructure and supporting the operations of tenants and vessel operators with their development expertise. Prologis was the only respondent who proposed an alternate configuration of the port. The Prologis plan called for maintaining the finger pier layouts for piers 8, 9A, and 9B. However, rather than using the piers for ship berthing, this plan calls for moving a substantial portion of the residential development onto the finger piers. The remaining residential program would remain in the BMT North and Atlantic Basin areas, but the portion of the BMT North area would be lifted a full story above the current ground plane to push it above the floodplain. The port facilities would then be located in a garage under the residential component, and ships containing bulk cargo or roll-on, roll-off cargo would berth between the finger piers, while container ships would continue to berth at Pier 10. Container storage and operations would happen in an open-air yard at Pier 10 and an enclosed warehouse facility under the residential. Although the Prologis alternate vision would result in a slightly larger footprint for port operations at 67 acres rather than the 60 acres we originally had, during our interview with them, Prologis explained that the redesign of the site was primarily intended to bring the residential component and the public access closer to the waterfront, rather than cutting it off behind enclosed off-port facilities. By redesigning the site, they wound up with a 67-acre port, but this was not the result of a firm belief that the port needed to be larger. The relocation of a portion of the residential development to the finger piers would bring down the heights of the buildings in BMT North, while maintaining the same number of units in the vision plan. However, we must note that in previous conversations with the New York State DEC, the regulatory hurdles for building residential units on finger piers will be significant. DEC has expressed little interest in approving non-maritime related uses being built on decks above water. Prologis proposed bringing in a future partner with port operations experience to be a tenant on site to operate the container port, the cargo operations, and cruise terminal. While the proposal forgoes the marginal pier and redesigns the layout of the port, Prologis also emphasized the importance of the connection to Hunts Point and the ability to expand within the site rather than through with the 67 building. You see the rendering up there, but on the right.
Since you said something there, has the DEC approved the size of your marginal pier?
Yeah, John.
But this is a quick. I've had 30 questions, but this one is important. The DEC have they approved the marginal pier that you're saying now, the size of it? Have they say that one is okay?
Now they're finished. You can have questions at the end. Thank you.
See, this is the thing. We'll have like 30 questions. You only answer 2.
I'm sure you will get questions.
Shut the fuck up.
So can you put the microphone closer to your mouth? I
Absolutely.
insisted that it was much clearer.
Sure.
Thank you
No problem.
very much.
I apologize.
It's all right.
As mentioned before, the next, sorry, that was problems. Real term transportation is a real estate private equity firm specializing in transportation-related assets that support the global supply chain, especially at airports, including JFK, Newark, LAX, and Chicago O'Hare. The firm has 30 years of experience and more than $13 billion worth of assets under management. They focus on acquiring, developing, financing, and managing logistics and infrastructure assets that serve land, sea, air, and rail networks. Locally, Real Term owns and operates 38 assets in the New York, New Jersey region, valued at $1.8 billion. They have worked on public-private partnership projects at Newark Liberty Airport and JFK, including the first new ground-up cargo facility at JFK in over 25 years. Real Term will partner with a port operator and does not have direct port operations experience, and therefore does not provide much specific feedback about the importance of the marginal pier or the Hunt operation. However, they did express that they felt a 60-acre size port would be appropriate and provide opportunities for growth. Can you guys still see the screen when that's on? Does that work? Is that okay? Maybe we turn out this one. Yeah, let me turn out this one. I don't know if you're turning on. They plan to also partner with a cruise operator to operate the BCT. Sintra is a transportation infrastructure concession arm of Ferrovial SE, which is a global leader in the development and operations of sustainable infrastructure. Ferrovial also includes a business unit that focuses on airports, including the development of the new Terminal 1 at JFK, a unit focused on sustainable energy infrastructure developments, and a unit focused on engineering and construction of complex infrastructure projects. Sintra has been in business for over 50 years and currently operates across North America, Europe, Australia, and South America. While Sintra does not have any in-house port operations, they are in the process of building up a dedicated port operations team, whom they intend to be the ultimate operator of the port of BMT. They're partnered with Skyrock Advisors, which is a port and maritime infrastructure management and consulting firm, to help build up this team. Principals at Skyrock have experience at CMA CGM, which is a French firm that is one of the largest container shippers in the world, Moeller, and Ports America. Sintra's response indicated support for the 60-acre-sized port, emphasized the importance of the marginal pier, calling it highly advantageous. That's what they do. And planned the ability to grow operations through densification on site. Sintra referred to the potential Hunts Point connection as a unique opportunity to create an integrated maritime logistics network that advances the objectives for sustainability, efficiency, and economic development. They see Hunts Point and BMT as complementary assets when connected that can transform New York City's maritime logistics into a sustainable, resilient, and future-ready system. Sintra will partner with a cruise terminal operator. The next group includes 7 firms that propose occupying a portion of the site without being a full port operator. Many of them are currently tenants on site. We're going to do 2 a page for these ones. 6 Borough Marine is affiliated with Lehigh Maritime, who is currently a tenant at Pier 11. U.S. Coastal is currently operating a BMT in the inlet between Pier 7 and Pier 8. Both of these firms have been active in the early stages of the Blue Highway network and are looking to grow that network significantly over time. They both have ships that are approximately 300 linear feet and prefer to berth in a protected area such as the Atlantic Basin.
Wait. I really just like you can ask questions. I didn't have questions.
Continentia Capital is a real estate investment and advisory firm specializing in innovative urban solutions. Like the previous 2 respondents, they are interested in providing Blue Highway-related services. However, unlike the previous 2, They do not currently operate in this area. While they are interested in protected waters at Atlantic Basin, they are operationally site agnostic and would be just as happy with space at other waterfront locations along the East River, including the Brooklyn Army Terminal and the 23rd Street Basin. Atlantic Salt is a woman-owned, family-operated importer and distributor of road salts. They currently have facilities in Staten Island and Port Newark and are interested in expanding into BMT in order to better serve their clients in Brooklyn, Queens, and Long Island. They're seeking an approximately 4-acre parcel of land with waterfront access. Marine Design Dynamics is a naval architecture and marine engineering firm with 20-plus years of experience. They are seeking approximately 300 to 500 linear feet of berthing space, preferably in the Atlantic Basin, and 5,000 to 10,000 square feet of upland space to create a facility for the repair and energy retrofit of ships. Skyport is a global drone vertiport developer operating across 5 continents. They are the current operators of the downtown Manhattan Skyport in Lower Manhattan and also operate a heliport in London. Skyport is looking for an approximately 1-acre site for the creation of a drone blue highway logistics facility to bring goods across the East River by drone.
Those are the fucking parts.
And lastly, in Skagway, we have Portside, New York. Portside is the operator.
Portside. Yeah, Portside.
Portside is the operator of the Mary Wayland, currently berthed at Pier 11. They are a nonprofit Revit-based organization that has been providing maritime education, workforce training, working waterfront advocacy, and other programs at BMT for almost 20 years. Their proposal included an expansion of their current programming, serving workboats and blue highway providers, including adding 20,000 square feet of interior upland space in a building at Pier 11. And that space could include exhibit space, office space, a welcome center, and flexible programming space. They also included a wet lab, a rebuilt Portside Park alongside the berthing space, and an outdoor nature center. Portside is interested in remaining berths at Pier 11. The next category includes 2 firms who are active cruise terminal operators who are only interested in operating the Brooklyn Cruise Terminal section of the property. Cruise Terminal International, or CTI, was formed in 2023 and is owned by Icon and the Royal Caribbean Group. It is an independent global designer, developer, and operator of cruise terminals worldwide. CTI owns Miami Cruise Terminal A, which handles over 2.1 million passengers annually, as well as projects in Ravenna, Italy, which is under construction and opening in 2026, Barcelona, which is under construction, and St. Thomas and Fiumicino, Italy. Both are in the planning stages. CTI's proposal validates many of the assumptions made in the vision plan, including the general size of the cruise terminal building, the size ships that could be attracted, and the importance of building attractive public space around the cruise terminal building. They are also committed to providing state-of-the-art shore power facilities. Global Ports Handling, or Global Ports Holding, or GPH, is a cruise port developer and operator that has been in operation since 2004, managing 32 cruise ports across 19 countries, including Nassau, Barcelona, Singapore, Lisbon, and San Juan. Combined, their terminals will welcome over 22 million passengers in 2026. GPH's proposal is also supportive of the vision plan for cruise operations at Pier 12, and also emphasized the importance of implementing state-of-the-art shore power development. The remaining respondents were mostly focused on providing services to the port operator or to BMTDC. In general, these respondents fell into 3 categories. Some, like Harris and Crowley, were offering consulting services for structuring public-private partnerships. Others, like Arup, Persic and Wormfold, SST, and Transtat, were design firms who were interested in providing design services related to a certain aspect of the BMT project. And finally, some were offering services to the eventual port operator. These included towing services, electric vehicle charging infrastructure, or autonomous pallet scale blocks. Now we're going to talk about next steps. Before we move into next steps, I want to take a moment to explain how the port RFEI responses relate to the environmental review process, since that's a question for recruitment. Under SEQA, which is the State Environmental Quality Review Act, an environmental impact statement, or EIS, is required to include an alternatives analysis. The purpose of this analysis is to look at reasonable and feasible options that either avoid or reduce significant environmental impacts, or that approach the project in a different way while still meeting the project's core goals and objectives. This analysis results in an apples-to-apples comparison of alternate scenarios to the proposed project, so decision makers can clearly understand the trade-offs between different scenarios. Under state law, the EIS will always include at least one alternative known as the no action alternative, which reflects existing conditions if no project were to move forward. And if the proposed project were to result in unmitigated significant adverse impacts, the EIS would also include a no unmitigated significant adverse impact alternative, which represents a modified version of the project that avoids those impacts. We don't know whether our EIS will include that impact until we start the EIS process. That alternative until we start the EIS process. The draft scope of work released in September also notes the potential for including a work alternative informed by the RFEI. The ideas, feedback, and themes raised through the RFEI help inform whether such an alternative is reasonable and feasible to the study. Ultimately, it is the lead agency's decision on which alternatives are reasonable to study. I also want to emphasize that while alternatives are studied in the EIS, there's no requirement that alternatives be selected or implemented at the end of the process. The purpose of that analysis is to inform decision making, not to predetermine it. Turning to next steps, I'm sharing a reminder that the scoping comment period has been extended to May 8th. This meeting is not a forum to lodge formal comments on the environmental impact of the scoping documents. So if you'd like to comment on the draft scope of work or environmental review framework, written comments can be submitted to the Mayor's Office of Environmental Coordination, and those comments can refine what will be studied in the draft EIS or DEIS. The Mayor's Office of Environmental Coordination's contact information can be provided after on screen. Separately, the BMT board will review and discuss report RFEI responses at its next board meeting in the coming months. That discussion will focus on what we learned from the respondents, including themes that may be relevant to the environmental review and future decision-making, like procurement strategies and lease structures. Importantly, the closure of the public comment period for scoping in May does not restrict our or the BMTDC's ability to carefully review RFEI responses or comments on those responses and incorporate new insights throughout the summer and fall into a draft EIS, which will be released around that time. Any alternatives identified that will result in the RFEI review, BMTDC deliberations, or deemed necessary in the lead agency's judgment will be comprehensively evaluated and presented in the forthcoming DEIS. There will be a dedicated public hearing and comment period for the DEIS and the general project plan, providing further opportunities for the public to weigh in and for additional feedback to be considered. This process ensures that there's sufficient time and flexibility to incorporate the latest findings from the RFEI and to appropriately analyze a range of reasonable alternatives. While the EIS may include a port alternative for its value and comparative analysis purposes, it is also important to emphasize that we continue to advance the Brooklyn Marine Terminal project as outlined in the approved division plan and as detailed in the draft scope of work. Alternatives within the EIS will ultimately be judged by how closely they fulfill the project's goals and objectives as outlined in the vision plan. Thank you, and now we have some time for Q&A.
So we're going to move to the Q&A portion. We'll have a mic float around. You can break through your hands so the gentleman did there. Just a couple notes from
You scratching?
I want to hear from
This guy's a robot. He's in feedback. EDC robot.
There we go. We'd like to hear from as many of you as possible who have questions. So we ask that you keep your questions to questions as well as focus them on the port RFEI responses. So with that, Juan, I'll pass around the microphone.
Hello, thank you for the presentation a third time. I wanted to, spoke with you guys a while ago. I wanted to understand what is driving the requirement for any housing in this project. In the sort of gold section, I didn't see any mention about housing, anything to say that you had to use that land for that purpose. Is it the financial aspect of allowing people to develop there that you need the money to drive the rest of the project, or is there an incentive or a reason outside of that?
Thank you. That's a good question. And I tried to address it in the early stages, but I'll elaborate on it. Essentially, when you look at the BMT land today, the campus is 122 acres. A large portion of that property is underutilized. And the goal of this project was to bring all of those underutilized pieces of property into full utilization, to bring this up to what it could be. We start with the port part of the project. And as I mentioned, the port uses on the site are very constrained to a lot of infrastructure uses. So when you start with the port operations, and you try to figure out what the optimal size of the port is, where we round up was that it didn't make sense to have a port operation that was more than 60 acres. So that leaves 60 acres left over that is underutilized. We're in a housing crisis, we have been for several decades, and underutilized land in an attractive neighborhood is a great opportunity to provide some of that housing. And so we started looking at ways that we could provide that housing. We've committed to 40% affordable, which is unprecedented really. And we think this is a great opportunity for this neighborhood to do its part in terms of contributing to all the housing that needs to get built in order to alleviate this crisis. It also works out that because of the mix of affordable and market rate housing, that housing would generate some revenue that we could reinvest in the site and can help offset some of the costs that are associated with bringing the port portion of this up to speed. So that at the end of the day, we have a bunch of public money that has already been committed, about almost $500 million. We think that between the real estate land value and the potential pilot, capturing the pilots, the payments of the taxes, we can capture another couple of $1 billion, and then we're going to continue to search for additional public funding for the rest of it. But we think that housing can serve two purposes, of both contributing to the housing crisis and also offsetting some of the costs by cross-subsidizing the port use.
Sorry, can I have a follow-up? I'm sorry. Is it on? Okay. Sorry, I didn't quite get the answer. You're saying that it would be good to alleviate the housing problem. Don't disagree. You're saying that there is a cost to running a port. You think that the right size port is 60. Fine. But why do you have to make that decision? And why are you in control of building this house? Meaning if you need 60 acres, you take your 60 acres, and the other 60 acres can be left to make a decision down the road. Why are we doing all of this all at once? And, I've been in this place twice. The first time I came here, everyone was saying they wanted 120 acres of housing. Now I'm here probably 6 months later, and there's a lot of people who say they don't want any housing. Why are you forcing this decision around a very contentious issue? Because some people will say 40 is not enough, some people will say 40 is way too much because that's extremely valuable land, and you can build double the amount of space somewhere else for the same money. Why are you making this decision now?
So, I believe I appreciate you reiterating the question, but I'm going to reiterate my answer, which is that we're in a housing crisis, and when there are opportunities to find places to build large sections of housing, 6,000 units of housing on this project is a significant chunk, and you can go around building 100 units there, 100 units there, but that's not going to help alleviate the crisis. You really need, from an affordability perspective, to bring in more housing to the site, both affordable and market rate housing. You need to be opportunistic with opportunities present themselves, and 60 acres of underutilized land in this location is a great opportunity to be responsive to a crisis that we're all dealing with.
So then give it to the housing department.
I'm sorry.
I thought you're an economic development corporation.
So EDC, through its as the Economic Development Corporation, is involved in housing projects all the time. As an example, as we speak, the Red Star Revue development in Queens is going on, which is thousands of housing units as well. So this is not something that EDC is unfamiliar with. When we do projects that involve large affordable housing contingents, we often partner with HPD, which would likely be the case as we move forward with this as well.
So have they said what their opinion is?
HPD. So representatives of HPD came to some of our task force meetings and we've been in touch with them on this project. Yes.
Good evening. My name is Deborah Tackney. I live at the Columbia Terrace condominiums, which are located right next to Pier 10. We've been here for 40 years and have been exposed to pollution from the adjoining cruise and container ship ports and the ships themselves. You said, and I quote, "The vision plan is looking to create a modern port that responds to 21st century needs." This is an environmental review process. Yet, you did not think to ask your port operators, cruise operators, tenants, or service providers what environmental impact they would have on the communities that would be surrounding them. This should include examples of how they are actively reducing greenhouse gas emissions by decarbonization initiatives. Do they have a history of diesel emission reduction? Do their vessels include reusable diesel, dual fuel, and alternate fuel models, including liquefied natural gas, methanol, ammonia, and biodiesel? Do they use sustainable marine fuels? Do they have a green marine environmental certification? Do their proposals include shore power capable berths, zero emissions equipment, electric infrastructure? Are they using hybrid electric towboats or solar paneled work barges? What kind of engines will the towboats use? Caterpillar Tier 4 reduces it by 90%. Are they using electric rudders? The cargo and cruise ships idle while they're in port. We can see the black smoke from our windows and they clog our air filters. I know that we can offer shore power capable berths, but it won't matter if the ships themselves cannot access the shore power. According to the Northwest Seaport Alliance, May 2024, only 2.4% of the global commercial field is equipped with shore power connections. Supposedly, 61% of the global cruise ship capacity is equipped for shore power connection. Will this be a variable you will consider when choosing a company? California, as a part of an effort to reduce the environmental impact of maritime shipping, particularly within vulnerable portside communities such as ours, has implemented one of the most ambitious port emission control programs to date. I'm sure there are other international models. What are they expecting from their cargo ship companies? This should be a priority of yours. Additionally, you should be considering how your tenants will impact public health. We just had a problem with a company that was storing recycled concrete. The dust was carried into the lungs of neighborhood children. I am a board member and a treasurer of the Columbia Street Waterfront Association, and we worked with our neighbors and electeds to shut it down after months of exposure. We don't need a salt storage company. Noise pollution. Working piers and marine terminals generate significant noise pollution, affecting both surrounding communities and marine life. Key sources include cargo handling, heavy machinery, ship engines, and traffic. A sky port should not be considered. Heliports in Lower Manhattan were recently banned by the City Council as they failed to meet strict FAA Stage 3 noise standards. We don't need a skyport here, compounding the noise we will be exposed to from the piers. In conclusion, the environmental impact profile of each and every company should have been included in the RFEIs. It should have been a leading variable being considered once the RFPs are generated. The public health of the surrounding communities is in your hands.
Thank you. I'm going to start answering, and I think Anton has something that they're going to answer as well. So thank you for that question. The environmental impacts of these potential operators is very much on our minds, and as it has been since we started the task force. As you've heard us say a bunch of times, we talk about this port as an all-electric port in terms of all its vehicles and increasing shore power capability and reducing the environmental impact of the port operation to the maximum extent possible. I didn't reference it in this presentation, and I apologize for that, but many of the responses that we got included commitments from operators to do that, to go all electric, to be environmentally sensitive. It came up in a lot of our interviews with responses as well. One of the questions we asked them about was, we've got housing relatively close to a port operation. Oftentimes people think that may have a conflict because of environmental concerns. Can you tell us a little bit about how you alleviate that? Do you have other port properties that are as close to residential properties where you've been able to handle that? And many of them responded positively to that, that is an issue they've worked on before. I want to clarify one thing, which is you referenced the drone operator and the salt. The respondents to this RFEI that we're supposed to hear, this is not us endorsing those uses by any means, right? This is just us reporting to you what responses we got. By including them in this presentation, we're just being transparent about what we received in response to this RFEI. It does not indicate that we view those uses favorably. It does not indicate that that is a likely use that's going to wind up here. It's just an indication of what responses we got when we issued this RFEI publicly. So I appreciate that there are concerns with some of the responses we got. I'd like to make sure that everyone understands that this is just us reporting what we got. This is not an endorsement by any means. As it relates to cruise operations and shore power, I'm going to turn it over to Anton to get a little more picture.
I certainly share those objectives on the environmental points and committed to decarbonizing in maritime and aviation, doing that across our portfolio. I think the opportunity to look at this port holistically as 60 acres is one procurement, is that we can incentivize investment into this port, whereas maybe more piecemeal today. So that's one of the objectives, is by doing this together as one plan, and we can really get that interest and make sure that we're making those long-term, those large, extensive investments in systems like shore power, for example. Thank you.
And then just lastly, I want to emphasize that when we eventually do put together the RFP, and we are selecting an actual port operator, I can commit to you now that the extent to which that they have a plan to mitigate their environmental impacts on surrounding uses will be one of the considerations that we will use for selection.
Hi there. I came in a little late, so forgive me if you presented on this, but I'm just reviewing the packet, and I'm seeing that the cruise terminal has a 2,500 parking space thing on it. This is for the Red Hook terminal. There's so much traffic there. I used to live in Red Hook, and there was an insane amount of traffic for the cruise terminal specifically. So, the EDC also manages the NYC ferry schedule, and I just took that into Red Hook recently, and it was a 48-minute wait from the next ferry from Wall Street to Red Hook. So I'm super concerned about the additional congestion, especially with the Blue Highway additions and not the penny cabs, but the e-bike traffic. What have you guys, I know that the EIS is supposed to really determine the transportation needs, but if transportation needs aren't even reflected in this proposal, I find that like a total cluster waiting to happen. So I'm just, what are you guys doing on the back end to make sure that public transit is adjusted to meet the need of not the traditional cruise ship, like a hotel and that, but the 6,000 units and 15,000 additional residents that are slated to be added to the neighborhood. Just so you know, Red Hook is already a transit desert.
Thank you for that question. So again, just to clarify, the 2,500 parking spaces that you referenced were in one of the, I think it was CTI or GPOs, one of them proposed 2,500 parking spaces. We had asked them about that proposal because that's a very big number. Currently, the parking lot at the Brooklyn Cruise Terminal is about 500 spaces, and in the vision plan, the proposal would be to include about that many for the cruise terminal as well.
Is that for staff or is that
That's for passengers. We have been, over the past 2 years or so, there have been larger ships that have been docking at the cruise terminal, which has led to more passengers kind of embarking and debarking at the same time. And EDC has actively worked with the community and local elected officials and BMT to help alleviate some of the congestion that has come out of that. It was, I think there was a couple of weeks there where it was pretty rough, and I think everyone in the community can agree that it's gotten a lot better over the last 2 years. And it is not our intention to build a 2,500 car parking garage for the cruise operations. That particular operator, when we asked them about it, what they were suggesting, what they were proposing was they wanted to create one large parking garage with the Brooklyn Cruise Terminal and the Manhattan Cruise Terminal in this location, and they wanted to ferry people from Brooklyn over to Manhattan because they were under the impression that it would be more difficult to create parking in Manhattan than in this neighborhood. And as we all know, it's actually the opposite. That having large volumes of cars in this neighborhood with the smaller streets is way more difficult than getting cars to right off the west side of Manhattan. So that was their proposal. We have to the other question, which is that just because something is in here, that does not mean that we're proposing it. To your other points, you're right, EDC runs the ferry system. I highly recommend that you go to our website and download the vision plan itself, because the vision plan contains full sections that include our plan for alleviating traffic and congestion and improving transit to the site, which includes the commitments in the vision plan to decreasing headway, which means decreasing the time between ferries as part of this plan. I think we believe we committed to cutting it at least in half, so from 40 minutes down to 20 minutes. It also included subsidizing shuttles to get people from the neighborhood to the subway stops, and also working with the MTA to increase bus service to the neighborhood. So in addition, as I mentioned before, when we do issue the RFP for the port operator, one of the main decision points that we're going to be using to select someone is their ability to mitigate traffic impacts in the neighborhood. And as many of the port operators have said, the best thing for them to do would be to bring goods in by boat and out by boat, and so that nothing comes out. So as little as possible comes out by truck. The plan also includes an improvement of the gate areas so that it more directly gets to the highway. It doesn't travel through the neighborhood as much. So there's really a whole bunch of transportation improvements that are included in the vision plan that address the issues you raised. And I highly recommend downloading that and reading those things because I think you'll find that they're very responsive to your question.
But I guess why is the service for the ferry already so bad? Why can't the EDC just already improve it instead of waiting for this project to get greenlit?
Right. Service for the ferries is obviously the timing of service for the ferries is obviously very complicated. It is driven by the density of demand and where that demand is needed, and also the cost of running our services. So we have a lot of places throughout the city that are asking for more shuttle service and places that don't currently have spots to get more spots. Those are all on our agenda. Our goal will be to have a more robust ferry service to the maximum that we can. Obviously, we're resource constrained, and so we have to prioritize that as we go forward.
It'd be super helpful to see the responses to these pitches in this, so it doesn't just look like this is what we're going to get. I'd like to see awareness of that, please.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
I'm referring to the CTI pitch
With the parking lot, but I don't see.
I don't see any responses like EDC.
We haven't issued responses to these. We've accepted them, we're reviewing them with the board, and we're really reviewing them for a number of reasons, as we mentioned, one of which is to help us determine the nature of any recommended port alternative in the EIS, but also, as we go forward, it'll help shape some of our thought process on designing as we move through design the site, and also issue eventual RFPs for the operation of the development.
Just the way that parking works, like if you build more parking, it will create more demand for driving.
Yeah. Aware.
Awesome.
Thank you. My name is James Morgan. I'm a 30-plus year resident of the Columbia Street District, where the majority of this development will take place. In fact, I believe my first question goes towards what the first gentleman asked. On page 29 of this proposal, presenting again, which was also presented online, one of the purposes of the alternative analysis, you state, is to achieve the same goals and objectives as the original plan. The original plan, as announced by the EDC and our former Mayor Adams, when you announced the acquiring of this property, was to revitalize the port, in short. Am I correct?
That was one of them.
Well, housing was never mentioned in that original announcement, wasn't
No, that's not true.
it? Right? It wasn't. Okay.
No, that's not what I said. I said that's not true. I was at the press events, I was on site with the governor and the mayor, and housing was definitely mentioned in that.
Well, did I understand your answer to the gentleman's question that your goal of this project was to revitalize the port, and then in that process, you identified funding sources and what you call underutilized land that could be used for housing to provide the funding?
As I described to the other gentleman, that the housing serves two functions. It alleviates, it is responsive to the housing crisis, and it also wanted to provide some additional funding to offset the costs of investing in the port.
But are you still not saying that this is a port revitalization plan?
It is also a port revitalization.
Right.
It doesn't have to be one thing.
Well, how do you square that, for instance, with Jennifer's son from the EDC repeatedly saying to abandon public meetings, which I attended online, that the EDC has and continues to approach the Brooklyn Marine Terminal with the goal of maximizing housing and understatement?
I'm not familiar with that specific statement, but I will tell you that we have consistently throughout this process expressed that this is a project that cannot be simplified into one simple goal. It is a multifaceted project that includes many of the needs that are necessary for this neighborhood and for these multiple industries. The city at any given point in time has a lot of needs, and we are able through this project to meet several of those needs simultaneously.
Well, my understanding throughout this process is that the EDC never pursued meaningfully any alternative funding sources once you supposedly identified the amount needed, which many maritime experts and public officials have said is vastly overinflated, that you never pursued alternative sources of funding other than housing on what is one-of-a-kind land. If you remember, our borough president, Reynoso, when he was still against this plan at a city council meeting, told the EDC officials that this is a special piece of land, the waterfront, it's irreplaceable, and that if you're serious about alleviating the housing affordability crisis, he had a, quote, laundry list of properties available that could be built on immediately, as opposed to this Disneyland-like quagmire we're getting into, where you're landfilling, decking, to provide housing on what is an irreplaceable asset.
So I agree with the borough president. This is a special piece of land, and I believe that the project, the vision plan that put forward, it recognizes the specialness of that with a plan that is worthy of that. I forget your question at the beginning.
Well, I'm just trying to square this. For instance, when our borough president changed his long-established opposition to this plan from a no to a yes, he touted the reason was the inclusion of this RFEI process, which you're discussing today.
Which is meaningless.
He has consistently said from that point on that the purpose of this was to discover possible alternatives to your plan, not to be consistent with your plan, which I see repeatedly in your proposal here, that you're looking at these RFEIs, you keep touting them, it was like the second line down from each RFEI proposal, that they were consistent with your original plan. The borough president said who knows, we could come out of this RFEI process with an all maritime usage without any housing. How do you square those two things if you're looking for consistency and apples to apples?
I think you're misinterpreting or misunderstanding what I said. What I said for each one of these, I didn't say we are looking for consistency. What I said was we issued this RFEI, and we were very clear in the RFEI, and it's been publicly available, and you can look at it yourself. There are multiple locations in the RFEI where we very clearly said, although the vision plan has this 60-acre port and the 6,000 units of housing in it, we are looking for feedback from the maritime industrial community about whether this plan makes sense and whether you think there's an alternative vision that makes more sense. What I'm describing in this presentation is that the responses that we, having been open to get alternate plans, we got feedback, and almost all of them did not provide an alternate plan. Most of them said, no, we like what you've done, we don't think it's appropriate to do an alternate here. So that is how it's written. The borough president was very clear that during the early stages of the task force, where he had expressed reservations about the plan, part of his reservations was that he was concerned that not a deep enough dive had been done to find a potential maritime operator that would potentially want to operate a larger than 60-acre port. And that was why, I want to speak for him, but I think he said this publicly, that was why he requested that we issue this RFEI, because that was going to be an opportunity to see whether that operator that he had kind of hoped and believed was out there would come forth during this process. What we see from the responses that we got is that there no operator like that came forth. What we got was a bunch of responses from folks who did not fulfill that request, and who instead said, no, we validated the plan. We agree that the 60-acre port makes a lot of sense to us. So we went searching for people who might say otherwise. We didn't find them. That's the end result here. We issued an RFP. We expressed an openness to hear that response. We publicized the RFP widely. We got 250 people download the RFP. We had a very robust response, and we did not get that response of that operator who said, no, I don't want to do that.
You said most, but not all.
I was caveating because the Prologis one did redesign it, although not to make it much better.
My final question here, which is, the RFEI the public is supposed to incorporate the RFEI information into our comments during the scoping period. How are we expected to do that when we're relying on the EDC's summaries as presented here, very brief, of these plans? How can we incorporate that? And I point out, and again, ask for if you could reply, since we've received no reply from the EDC to these two requests. Our elected officials, assembly members, and Borough President Reynoso issued a joint letter dated March 23rd asking the EDC to share the RFEI submissions along with the assessments of them. Not just your assessments of them, share the RFEI submissions. I understand there are confidentiality agreements signed when these are submitted, but Prologis has already released theirs, and one would think all you need to do, you're generally interested in giving the public as much information as we can get, is to ask the submission, the people who submitted, if they're okay with releasing it. We've received, the community and our elected officials received no response to that. I was hoping we could respond to that. Also, our elected officials jointly requested that the EDC host this meeting that is today in the most affected neighborhood, the Columbia Waterfront District, where I live. We have been asking for public meetings in the Columbia Street Waterfront District since this process began. Can you reply or explain why there is still a refusal from the EDC to take this information to one of the key areas that's going to be affected by it?
Yes. So I can't there were a lot of questions in there, so I'm going to try to remember them all and respond to them in order.
I got it written down.
In terms of, if I miss one of them now, in terms of the request for a response to the request to release the actual responses, as you noted, Prologis had attended one of the previous sessions and had thrown up a link with the link to their proposal, and they had volunteered to release theirs, so that is publicly available. In addition, as we mentioned during the presentation, we have made them available to all of the BMTDC board members and local elected officials, and I would say between half a dozen and 10 of them have kind of come into our office and looked through them and seen them also. So you can speak to your local elected officials about what they saw on that. As you mentioned, there are some concerns about releasing all of them. I can't comment on the request that the elected officials made in that March letter at this point. I believe a response is going to be forthcoming on that, but I can't comment on that right now. As it relates to the location of this meeting, we did receive that request to have the meeting a couple of blocks away in the Columbia Waterfront District. The concern we had was that the room that had been suggested is a lot smaller than this room, and we were concerned that there would be that it would not accommodate the number of people who were coming, and so we felt that this location, which is really only a couple of blocks away, just on the other side of the highway, would accommodate a larger capacity. And whenever doing any sort of community outreach, there's always a balancing act of trying to find a location that is conveniently located and also can accommodate the folks, because having a hearing at a location that was closer but where we had to turn people away would have been a bad thing. So I'm glad that we were able to make it over the BQE to this location at this point, even though it's not in that neighborhood. And we think that between this location being very close to the Columbia Waterfront District, as well as the online opportunities that we've already given, that the goal of providing accessibility to these hearings has been met. Thank you.
Hey, thanks. My name is Matt Suber, I live on Main Street. Two questions. At what point, if at any point in the EIS, are these respondents endorsed by the EDC?
I don't think these respondents are ever going to be endorsed by us. I think the EIS process, so let me let out the process a little bit, because I think there's some confusion, and I think this actually goes to something that you had said as well. We are in the scoping process of the EIS right now. The draft scope was issued in late September, and we've been in that scoping session for almost 5 months now. By the time we finish, it'll be something more than 5 months. Just as a side point, the comment period for a scoping document, the regulatory requirement is 30 days. So this is going to wind up being more than 5 times the mandated time for a comment period. What happens next is that the comments that we received, and then this is not a scope and comment session, there have been official scope and comment sessions. In addition to submitting comments at the official sessions, you can also submit comments in writing, and whether they are oral comments that were submitted at the sessions or whether they're written comments, they're treated equally in the process. They're then compiled and responded to. And when the draft EIS is issued, it will include a final scoping document, which will be the draft scoping document, plus any changes that were made by the comments that we received, and a listing at the end of all the comments that were received, together with the responses to those comments. After that, the EIS will include an analysis of alternatives. We know that 2 of the alternatives that will be included in the EIS, one will be the no action alternative, as I described before, which is basically what happens if we don't do this project and the current conditions stay the same, or there's no investment in the property. And the other is the plan that was in the vision plan. One of the areas of question right now is whether there will be additional alternatives that will be included. Ultimately, the Mayor's Office of Environmental Coordination is the lead agency, and so that will be their ultimate decision about whether to include alternatives or not. The BMTDC board, as a very interested party, will be reviewing these submissions and will make a recommendation to the mayor's office of environmental coordination, but it was ultimately their decision about whether they want to ask for additional alternatives to be included.
Right, but I mean, these respondents are submitting their priorities. So
I'm going to finish. I'm going to get that. So these respondents are submitting responses to this RFEI because there was some thought that perhaps we'd get a response that would be so compelling that we would want to create an alternative that reflected that information. I'm not here to comment today on whether any of the comments that we got here are so compelling. That's going to be up to the BMTDC board and the mayor's office of environmental
So
coordination.
the board hearing is the more relevant venue for
Right.
the decision-making process.
But once the draft, during the scope session, and this is something that's gotten a little muddled throughout this whole process, and so I want to try and clarify as much as I can. During the scoping process, one of the most one could get out of the scoping process, if one wanted to have an additional alternative listed, is that the scoping document would list the potential for there to be a port-only alternative. The draft scoping document included that option. So the next step about whether to include that scope or not is going to happen at the EIS level. So when the draft EIS is issued, which we believe will be towards the end of this calendar year, there will be a comment period there. There will be ample opportunity to see what alternatives are included in that draft EIS. If you read the draft EIS and you don't see an alternative that you think should have been included, that is an opportunity to submit comments on that draft EIS saying you should include alternative X, Y, or Z. And the lead agency will then be responsible to respond to those comments be used to reinvest in the port facility. So to the extent that there is over $1 billion in costs that the public sector would be responsible for before turning it over to a private partner for investment, a portion of that will come from the grant money that we've already achieved. A portion of that will come from grant money that we are continuing to apply for every day. We just submitted the grant application to the state just last week. And a portion that will come from the revenues that are generated from the residential development. So to answer your question about whether they're incentivized, we do anticipate that we're going to have to commit a large sum to bring this port up to a state of good repair, and some of that money that we are committing to that will come to us from the residential development.
Right, so will the public component of the investment in the port be offset by the residential, or partially private topside investment as well?
No, just the public.
Just the public.
Yeah, and the other thing I wanted to comment on was I'm trying to remember something else you said that I wanted to respond to.
The needs of...
Oh, yes. So during the interview process, many people throughout the whole task force process have brought up this concern that residential and industrial are usually two uses that don't get sited next to each other, and that siting them next to each other is the issue could be problematic. And so one of the questions we asked, specifically the 6 port operators that we interviewed, was whether they operate other ports around the world that are similarly situated with residential as close to their port as they see here. And many of them have responded that they do have other port facilities where that is the case, and that they've been able to manage it. And especially when you incorporate the kind of measures that we talked about here, which is electrifying the port. And many of the woman who commented earlier in the process here about the environmental concerns, that by focusing on having a modern port that mitigates a lot of the environmental concerns, which would be air quality, noise, and truck traffic, right? And focusing on a user who will have a comprehensive plan when we do the actual port RFP that addresses those, and making that one of prime consideration to use for who we're selecting, then that will further reduce the conflict between the two uses.
Hi, so Carolyn Salgaro from Board 7. I have operational questions to help understand some of your proposals and also alternatives. So about customs. Customs used to be on Pier 9B, but Portsmouth was struck for most of 10 years. They're now on Pier 8. How much of Pier 8 are they using? I forgot to ask about Florida.
They're using about 2/3 of Pier 8.
You're about using 2/3 of Pier 8. How many square feet is that?
Pier 8 is about 200,000 square feet, so I can't do the math in my head, but about 2/3 of 200,000 square feet.
Yeah, I can check out some of the work. Okay. I've really been wondering for quite a while with the movement of the produce to Hunts Point, or Hunts Point back. How is that going to be moved? Is that going to be stay containerized and then on chassis roll on? Is it Ro-Ro? Is it Lolo? What is the plan?
Yeah, that's a good question. Thank you for asking. There's a bunch of ways that can happen. So if produce is coming in from out of the country, obviously it's subject. I'm going back to your question about customs first, and kind of leading into it. So if it's coming in from out of the country, it's subject to potential inspection at the customs warehouse. Part of the new, but we haven't identified in our kind of drawings that we've shown exactly where a new customs inspection warehouse would go. Obviously, it wouldn't be on Pier 8 anymore. But somewhere in the uplands of that facility, there's enough space to have a new customs inspection warehouse. It doesn't necessarily have to be, it takes up a large amount of space right now. We've looked at other customs facilities. It might not wind up. The new customs facility, if it's built appropriately and custom built, could wind up being smaller than the current customs facility building. But there would be a new customs building, and some portion of the produce that we brought in would be inspected in that new facility. When inspections happen at the customs facility, a container is brought in, it is kind of completely unpacked, it is inspected, and then it is repacked back up into the container. So that when the customs process is done, you are left with a container that is fully packed in the way it was before it went in. So the idea is that, going to the Hunts Point connection, the idea is that things can be brought to Hunts Point in any one of a number of ways, including in containers or as well. So the idea is that a container could come off of a container ship. It either gets inspected by customs or doesn't. Only a portion of the things that come in do get inspected by customs, and then it can be put on a barge.
Okay, can I interrupt? I'm sorry. I understand customs really well. I talk to customs every day when we're there. I'm trying to understand, do you guys have a model yet for how you're moving the stuff from Hunts Point? So customs doesn't inspect every container of products. So then there's also dwell time, because that's how long the box is stay in the port. So what I'm trying to understand is with this Hunts Point plan, right now the boxes, or I shouldn't say right now, we are asking the part, not there all the time. They were plugged in, so the reefer boxes were outside. So what I want to know a couple of things. Are you going to have reefer boxes standing there, or are they going to go in a cold storage warehouse? And then how are they moving to Hunts Point? And also, are you going to be distributed out of Hunts Point by water coming to Zag?
Right.
So that's something, but I want to know how things, I want to unpack it.
Right.
I mean, literally, because you guys have been saying the long story about Hunts Point Blue, but it hasn't been specified. And I'm interested in getting specific operational information.
Right.
And if you don't have it, then I should say that, but what's the plan? If you have it.
So the short answer is some of what you asked I don't have yet, some of which I have a notion that I can kind of put forth, which is that the idea is to move stuff from BMT to Hunts Point by water, by barge. Once it arrives at Hunts Point it already has several distribution facilities, and so the idea is that the facility at Hunts
I
Point.
hate to interrupt you. How is it row-row or low-low? Are you have trains lifting boxes onto the barge, or are you putting them on chassis and rolling them? Either. Okay.
We're, at this point, those
because the Blue Highway firms that you identified, 6 Borough Marine U.S. Coastal, they can't handle many boxes. So I looked at that. So the vessels don't correspond to moving a lot of stuff. So
that's an important point. Let me clarify that. Many of the Blue Highway operators that were shown here who responded are, like the 6 Borough and
U.S. Coastal.
Yeah, U.S. Coastal. Those are relatively small operations with relatively small ships.
Yes.
We anticipate that firms like that would continue to operate out of the Atlantic Basin because of the protected waters that is necessary for ships of that size. When we talk about Blue Highway, there's kind of 2 tiers of Blue Highway. So there's those smaller operators that you mentioned already, kind of like one tier, and then there's also Blue Highway uses that is more akin to what the Red Star Container Terminal does today with its barging of those 30,000 containers to Newark, right? That is also Blue Highway use, and we anticipate that use to happen off of the marginal pier on the northern portion of the site, so that there would be kind of 2 things happening. Both would be called Blue Highway, but one of which involves barges with large containers on them, and one of them is kind of on a smaller scale.
Okay, because I was reading the Blue Highways document, second from the RFEI, and it was consistently talking about ferries, and the ferries are quite small and they're not suited for carrying a lot of containers. So I've been wondering how much volume.
Are you referencing the Blue Highways action plan document, or?
And the handout, there was a handout for a site visit, it didn't make the site visit, and I noticed the funding. Do you know who you're talking to? I don't understand that. I'm trying to unpack the Blue Highway. With all due respect, for limited time, you guys have been talking Blue Highway for a very long time. And I am in the spirit of helpfulness trying to find out how specific your plans are now, or is it still a big vague bucket? I'm not talking about aggregate, I'm talking about Hunts Point.
If I could finish this.
Well, excuse me, there's an aggregate company up there. I take that back.
I'll just say there's a number of different types of Blue Highway. So we can look at aggregates, we can look at containerized, which is what you're referencing. There's also micro freight, which is an emerging sector, which is like the last mile heat quads or delivery bikes. And so we're looking to accommodate those latter 2, and we're also engaged with industry, hosting Blue Highways industry days, trying to understand what are the, where is this industry going, how can we support it, and it's emerging, and we'll get smarter on it, and invite your input as well as part of, as we get smarter with industry on exactly the specifics around Blue Highways.
Okay, so it sounds like you don't have, you're still working out your Hunts Point over
Yeah.
Okay, got it. That's what I want.
Yeah, what I would say is that the hope for this facility and Hunts Point facility is to be as flexible as possible to respond to market needs so that it can happen in any one of those ways.
Okay. I don't want to take a lot of airtime now on, but I'd like to find somewhere again at some point more information about your plans for a changed Brooklyn Cruise Terminal, because you put that big part on the east side of Pier 12, but there's been no description that I've seen really how does the cruise terminal change operationally and how does that fit. And I know I was told by the ILA that they actually suggested that you guys have your freight at the opposite end. So at some point I would like to see that kind of information. And also related, I do not understand the language in the DSOW at all where you're talking about changing the entrance to the cruise terminal, the container port. You say to improve traffic, you're going to change the entrance there, where it is the primary entrance at Summit and Hamilton. You're going to make the exit, you're going to make Bound a dedicated exit, and then there's like magical language, and you're going to have a cruise entrance somewhere else, but there's a very limited streets to get elsewhere into the cruise terminal. Can you explain for all of us where you guys are talking about having the vehicles enter the cruise terminal now?
Yeah, as you said, within the vision plan, we contemplate a slight tweak to the current entrance and exit plan for the Red Container Terminal site, the container terminal site, and the move to have the exit happen off of Bound Street aligns it so that it's a straight shot to the BQE, so that it allows truck traffic that is leaving the container terminal to not go through the neighborhood and kind of go straight to the highway. The cruise terminal entrance, because right now, as you know better than anyone, there's kind of a fence around the whole site, and that's and it's closed off. The idea is with building 185, which is the GSA warehouse that's on Pioneer Street,
yes.
And the parking lots on English Street that is currently used for the staff. Both of those would wind up being new residential developments, and there would be new residential developments on a portion of what's currently the surface lot that serves the cruise. There would be new roads that were introduced, or rather extensions.
Can you give me a simple answer? Where are people entering the cruise terminal if Bound becomes a dedicated exit? What's the entrance to BCT?
Right. So when you talk about Bound, just to clarify, Bound right now is kind of a curved road. It kind of comes up and then goes down around Pier 11.
No, sorry, I'm talking about, okay, yeah, that's a fair point. Because the DSOW says that the Bound becomes an exit. So my understanding was then there were no longer going to be vehicles driving off of the mapped Bound Street. I'm not talking about inside the terminal. So are vehicles no longer driving into BCT off of Bound Street?
No, they would be coming off of Pioneer and I'm forgetting the names of the street on the side of Pioneer.
So I think you don't specify that in the DSOW, and I think people's hair is going to go on fire with that.
Right.
Because that means you're going to drive the cruise terminal traffic deeper into Red Hook. And so I was part of the working group with Alexa on this. We met weekly for 2.5 months, and there was a solution that was created which had vehicles queuing up inside the Atlantic Basin space. If you take that same number of vehicles and you run them down Van Brunt Street as far as Pioneer, you have to change the direction of Pioneer. Willow behind me, clusterfuck. That's what that, I don't actually see how that works operationally. I really don't. And then if you add housing on either side of it and making it narrower, that's,
right.
so your DSOW doesn't say Pioneer.
And it is not, you are correct, it is not in the DSOW, and that's because obviously, as you create a plan and move it from kind of an idea down to the specifics, then some issues are too kind of detailed to deal with at the DSOW level. We spent a lot of time.
Mentioning one street name is not too detailed. Come on. It's like you just say magically it's going to go somewhere else in the DSOW, you don't say where it's going to go.
No. So let me mention this. The idea is we understand the queuing issue associated with the cruise terminal today. Part of the reason for that is that the Pier 12 cruise terminal today is a retrofitted warehouse space that was not purpose-built to accommodate large numbers of drop-off and pickup. The new one, we've been working very closely with our design team to incorporate kind of best-in-class strategies for having design and pickup that would be way more efficient than it is right now, which would help mitigate those problems. And so there would be an entire new kind of street network that would be built in the area just south of the Atlantic Basin, on the area that is currently that surface parking lot area. And there would be queuing associated with that on those streets, as well as kind of a more efficient drop-off. There would be what we're looking at right now is a park, obviously having a surface lot on the waterfront is a terrible use of land. So we want to take that parking and turn it into structured parking, and that within that structured parking facility, we would have a ground transportation area.
I think DSOW needs to be included in that because it's just completely vague. And so therefore, yeah, I'm gonna leave it at that.
You're raising an appropriate concern, and something that we've been spending a lot of time working on, and will be included in kind of future iterations of planning. But it's a relatively specific item for what is a kind of general document, which is the DSOW, but it will be included in future in the GDP and the EIS.
Okay, and the last point is, it may be on your documents, but what is the comparison of the square footage? The coverage over water appears 8, 9A, and 9B. What is that square footage as opposed to what you would be covering if you were to propose marginal pier?
Yeah, so currently piers 9A and 9B are both 4.5 acres, so that's about 9 acres, and pier 8 is about 5 acres, so added together that's about 14 acres. The marginal pier is roughly 25 acres, so it's about 11 acres bigger.
Okay, thanks very much. That's it.
That actually goes to my other question before. So, because you criticize one of the plans because you don't think the DEC will approve it. Do you have any indication that they're going to approve the EDC plan the way it is now, covering up all that? Because I know the laws are very stringent, right, on covering up water.
Yeah, that's really
So,
and Phil.
have you guys gotten any indication that you're going to be able to get that passed?
Yeah, so I'll say a couple of things. First off,
it's really a yes or no question, like just yes. Because I have other questions. I don't want to bore everybody.
Ask your question, don't tell me how to answer a question. So
you're going to go through this whole half an hour thing, like I'm just... All right, go ahead, go. Go ahead, do it.
First off, we have spoken to DEC. We've had preliminary conversations with them. We've shown them the marginal pier that has been included in the vision plan, and they have indicated that they did not think that it would be a stopping point to build a marginal like that. Caroline, just to your point, it's just a deck. It's not Phil. Yeah. So Phil would be more problematic. This is just.
I thought it was Phil all along. My apologies.
First off, they have indicated that they thought that would be a feasible thing to do. The other thing is that oftentimes when you go to DEC and you seek to have additional coverage, one of the things that they require is mitigation for that additional coverage. So as part of our budgeting process, we have included a substantial amount of money to help pay for that mitigation, which would to the extent that DEC does include mitigation requirements, which we're not sure they would, but we're being conservative. We have assumed a budget to pay off that mitigation. The other thing is I think that it's not appropriate to compare the proligious use of housing on the deck with building a marginal pier for a very substantial reason, which is that DEC has approved the construction of piers over water. They have approved the construction of marginal piers. They have approved in various locations building piers that have additional coverage beyond what was there before, which is what we're talking about doing. They have never, in the history of New York State, approved a residential use on a pier. So to say that those two are apples to apples is not appropriate. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. So, all right. Last week, I had the privilege to talk to a prac class. It was a class on participatory planning. Fascinating. Would you consider this an exercise in participatory planning, this whole process that we've been through?
The RFEI process or the larger
The whole
task force?
the whole thing from beginning to end.
So the larger task force mission plan process has been shown. I don't have this slide here, but you've seen the slide a million times. You know, this process included a lot of outreach to the community. It included all sorts of public sessions. It included task forces. It included the task force. Sorry, the advisory committees that were made up of local respondents.
We got all that.
There was a very robust process that I think exceeded what would have happened to me.
You know what was missing from that? For it to be participatory, you got to share power with the community. You have to share power. Like, you have to be willing to listen to the community and be able to change the plan. If the community can't offer something that changes the plan in any material way, it's not participatory planning. So, like, I've sent you guys a letter requesting all of these consultants' reports and stuff, because I don't want a colored, self-serving summary from you guys. I want to read it myself. I want my neighbors to read it themselves. I want to read the Moffett Nichols. We're betting a lot on this. You keep mentioning them. We're betting a lot, 3-point-something billion, right? On this one memo, report, whatever you guys want to call it. Jennifer Sun said it was 2 pages. You said it was over 10. I don't know what the truth is, right? But all those consultant reports, we all can read. Just release them so that we can read them, and we can, maybe we'll decide the same thing you guys decided. Maybe we'll look at it and we'll say, you know what? But right now, we don't have the information. If this was a government, this would be, I don't know, a dictatorship or something. You tell us what we need, what we want to know. That's why you get all these questions, and people will leave here and they're like, well, we only got like 3 questions answered and we don't know. Because we shouldn't have to ask you everything.
Yeah,
You shouldn't filter.
Let me say something. You know what happened? I actually asked about the mega grant, trying to figure out what the street plan was. I was actually sent something by the EDC staff and told not to share it. It didn't actually directly answer the question that in buttonholing you, I finally got an answer that we're going to route it through Pioneer Street. But there's been that lack of transparency that I was told not to share information.
Yeah, so like that's a huge problem here. Like, when we first heard that there was going to be a redevelopment here, then this neighborhood got excited. Like, finally, we've been looking at this waterfront. That's not we know it deserves better than just garbage trucks and stupid stuff there. So we're like, okay, finally, there's going to be some investment, right? And then we were shut out of this process from beginning to end. And all we can do is try to remember a question at the end and have 1, maybe 2 questions answered, and then you guys go through a whole big circle. And by the time we only answered about maybe 7 questions. When we can answer our own questions if we had all the materials, just release it all. Release it all. Release even these RFEIs, whatever, RFEIs. Just release the information. We got Prologue has sent us the information. It was very informative, because right now, when you go through each one, you're just picking out, look, they agree with us, 64, this and that. But there's more to it than that. What's good about each one? This is how they agree with us. This is how they agree with us. This is how they agree with us. And everything is just, you guys have reverse engineered this whole thing from the beginning, right? I'll answer the guy's left. I think he left. His question. This was a real estate deal from day one. I mean, let's be honest. This is all this really was. The port was an afterthought, right? So, like, we've tried to be a part of this process, and we've come to all the meetings. We've begged you guys for information. Just really, please release all this information. You're gonna make us foil it, see what we get. It's gonna come, God knows when, and then it'll be too late to really be a part of this process. So I just wanted to say that, like, look it up, guys. Google participatory planning, and you'll see what that entails. And that entails giving the community some power, some agency, and giving them all the information so that they know, so that they can be part of the discussion. There he is. They can be part of the discussion. We have not been afforded that, and that's a shame. That's a real shame. You know, this is our community. And it's a lot at stake here. It's a lot of money. So it's a big project. And you guys have dictated to us from day one, even with the whole thing. 5 times this vote got canceled, because it was not the EDC way, it was the highway. You have to accept this, and people were not accepting it. 4 times they didn't accept it. It's the only time where you're losing in the 9th inning, you just keep extending innings, right? Until you can win the game. It's the only game that happens in. You guys lost 4 times and then finally won one last time, and you won it all. You know, and it's because of that, because we just haven't. I don't know what else to say. You know, it's real depressing. This whole process is depressing. I'm sitting here just depressed. You know. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm looking at the email right here which says, we would appreciate it if you did not distribute these documents.
Great.
This is dated on February 11th, 2025. Now, what kind of process is it when I, as an advisory group member, or even as a member of the public, can ask a question like, can we know from the mega grant where you're proposing, how you're proposing to improve the traffic circulation, and I'm sent an email being told not to share the information?
I'm not familiar with I'm not going to comment on it right now.
No, I'm sure. This is the way I'm following the way the law.
Okay. We'll do 5 more minutes and we're half an hour over. I appreciate you all staying with us. We've got 2 more questions.
I guess that was my question. Can they release everything? Can you release all the materials?
Related question, John, so I'll cover it.
Okay, my name is Susanna. My name is and everybody is still here, and thank you guys for doing the meeting. So, something number 7 and some of her colleagues had asked for a couple of things. They asked for more time, which Deputy Mayor Sue and you all granted, and then this meeting in person and one in Red in person, and to the ATF and the EDC. So I want to say kudos to you all and to Deputy Mayor Sue, because she said that all of our requests were granted. So I will say that is really much appreciated and different from the last administration. So I want to feel a little bit hopeful and positive about what is hopeful and positive. And then just wanted to go on to a couple of questions. So the RFEI, I know it was shared at some point. Is it still on the website?
I don't think it is, but I'm happy if anyone wants to see it.
It's on our blog.
Okay, yeah. So
I think we typically take down those kind of things after the due date. So I can, if anyone wants it, let us know. I'm happy to contribute. It's public document.
Great. Yeah, that would be helpful, because I think I'm just trying to square the fact that, okay, well, let me come back to that. So let me ask another question. Is there a lot of information in the responses that is not included in the summary?
You're asking me my judgment, right?
Yeah.
I've read through all of them. In my personal opinion, I think that this presentation captures the essence of this. There's a lot of the responses, you know, the responses were limited to about 25 pages. Many of them were shorter than 25 pages. Many of them were, you know, at least half just background about the respondent themselves. Just, you know, all of the stuff that a corporation would send you about how good they are, right? I tried to summarize that in like my paragraph on each one of them.
Right.
But there were multiple pages of that in each one of the respondents. And then, you know, the RFEI itself listed, in addition to its objectives, in order to kind of tease out the, you know, to kind of communicate to the respondents what types of information we were looking for, we listed, I want to say 25 to 30 specific questions. And so many of the respondents then, you know, went through our list of questions, and some of them kind of cherry-picked which ones they were going to answer and which ones they weren't, and so some of them kind of responded to those questions individually. Some of them included, you know, a paragraph or two about, you know, kind of their overall vision. I don't think there's a lot of more detail when you kind of go through the fluff of a submission that it wasn't included here. Other people may have different opinions. That's basically my opinion. I will tell you that, you know, as I mentioned before, to date, about 10 of the BMT board members or other elected officials have reviewed them already. And, you know, I've spoken to many of them after they reviewed them and kind of basically said, this is my impression of some of these. Does that square with your impression? And most of the folks who have reviewed them have agreed with me about the types of responses that we've seen. I know that we've been in conversation with the Assembly member about scheduling time for her to review them as well, and look forward to hearing her take on it, and she has to do that.
Okay, great, that's helpful. Just because, so she's mostly been in Albany, so that's part of the issue. But she's gonna look at them on Friday. Yeah, so she's gonna look at them on Friday, and I'm sure she'll share her feedback on that. I think I'm trying to figure out, how we go forward in the EIS with the alternatives, because it seems like you said there in all of the proposals, there's not really an alternative plan.
So as I mentioned, most of the respondents who commented on the entirety of the vision plan, said that they believe that the 60-acre size was appropriate, and that the way that we laid it out with a container port remaining at Pier 10 and a flex maritime port at Piers 8 through 9 and B with a rebuilt marginal pier seems to be an optimal layout. The only one that differed was the privileges plan, their focus was, thinking of the site more in terms of vertical layers, like a 7-layer cake kind of thing. And with the port at the lower level and the housing on the upper levels covering the same land, because they didn't like the idea of the housing being behind the port. They wanted to bring the housing up towards the waterfront. But other than that, the other respondents all basically looked at the vision plan and said, we think this makes sense.
Okay. All right. So I think maybe looking again, the assembly members within the stuff. So when we look at the RFEI and then I think look at the proposals, I think maybe some of my confusion will hopefully dissipate a little bit, because I'm just trying to figure out why there is such a lack of other plans, and maybe that's because of the way the questions were asked, or because these are folks who want to come and be part of this, and they kind of know where the city's going, so they want to be part of that plan.
Or it's because it's really good time.
Touche. Okay, so that's sort of like where I'm kind of stuck right now, but I think maybe we'll learn a little bit more. So the other thing is the assembly member did mention in the letter, and something you raised, John, and maybe you can check with a lawyer at EDC. It was her understanding that the RFEI proposals are not subject to the same confidentiality or procurement rules because it's not an RFP, so she thought it could be publicly shared. She mentioned that in the letter, so if we could get an answer to that would be great, because I think then people could see it and that would be helpful. And then the only other thing I really want to mention is going back to, this is a comment to Mr. Morgan's point earlier. I know we have to move forward, but I think, one of the issues that keeps coming up is when the city, we just pulled up the press release from May 2024, when the city first announced the plan, it really was drive economic growth, prioritize workforce development, jobs, modern port, focus on removing trucks. It was like, this is great, work in waterfront, modern, we need jobs, all of that stuff. And there was a reference to mixed-use development, such as housing. So I think, where we landed in the vision plan was quite different, and that's, why I think there's like this continual pushback of like, let's just make sure we are really exploring the things that the city originally really did say in May 2024. Okay, I know that's not on. Okay, thank you so much to all of you. Thanks so much to all of you for being here. And by the way, sorry, one more thing is the in-person meetings, because Joanne always likes virtual and in-person. And I will say, just from being here, I learned so much from your question, every time you talk, I learned so much from you. So I really do think there's benefit in having a little more conversation back and forth. It's just so different than being kind of screaming.
Alina learns a lot from hearing herself talk too.
So you mentioned that the current port does not sustain itself economically, it's underused, and it was also mentioned that it's needed, the residential is subsidizing the development of the port. Also was mentioned that this process of the RFEI did not have any economic proposals from these. This is just a feeling programming session. At what point, at what stage in this process is there going to be an economic evaluation? I mean, you could go down the line, theoretically, and these people could be blowing smoke and saying, yeah, I'd be interested, you're subsidizing the land, and then they come back and, you know, we're back to square one, but we're not really economically viable, and we dumped a bunch of money into this. At what point in the process is this analyzed economically?
Thank you. That's a good question. I want to clarify a couple of things first, and then I'll answer. So the RFEI did ask a bunch of questions on economics, on what you'd be willing to pay, what you'd be willing to invest, and how, explaining how the, cash flow of your business works. But obviously it's an RFEI, not an RFP, and so there's relatively low stakes, as you point out, and so many of the respondents kind of chose to yada 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 over those questions in their responses, as indicated. But I do want to, and this came up in a previous session, so I want to clarify that this RFEI that we're talking about today is not the only piece of market research that we've done upon which we base this plan.
Release it all.
RFEI is a useful
Release it all.
in specific circumstances, and in this case, for us, it's a supplemental tool. But the primary tool for understanding how the market works and how the economics works is through a robust market research study that was done at the very early stages of the task force. And as part of that, we asked the consultants to kind of think through the financial implications of, we know how the current container port operates financially. We know, where its revenues come from, where its expenses come from. We know how much it can afford to pay in rents. We know what it requires a subsidy. And one of the fundamental questions we asked first to our consultants was, what would it take to turn a container port at this location into a self-sufficient operation, right? Where revenues exceeded expenses and where it would make sense. And based on their wide knowledge of how ports and port finances work all around the world, they basically explained that if you were able to bring the infrastructure up to speed and to modernize the port, you'd be able to attract. Right now there's kind of 2 services that come into the port, but if you were to bring in a 3rd service, so just kind of 1 more, or even 2 more, which would be like amazing, then the additional revenue that would be associated with think of it as like you have kind of fixed set costs to run a facility, but you're only using it some of the time. So if you have those fixed costs that you're spreading that over kind of more business coming in, and so they believe that one additional service added to this port would flip it from a facility that is losing money to one that is gaining money. So then our focus shifted to what would it take to bring in another facility, and that's when we started focusing on modernizing, bringing it up to speed, bringing it to state of good repair, making it all electric, the kinds of things that would attract additional services to come to this facility. So that is kind of the starting point of this entire conversation, was how do we turn this port into something that makes financial sense? And that then led to the question of, well, in order to do that, in order to turn this facility into something that makes money, does that require giving it a larger footprint, or can that still happen within the 60-acre footprint? And that was another piece of the question that we asked our consultants, and they did a deep dive into that, and that's how we wound up with the plan that is in the vision plan right now. But that was based on looking at ports around the world and understanding, how much land they take up in order to have the number of movements of containers that would be required to make this work. And that's why, as you heard me say earlier in the presentation, that what's limiting this facility is not acreage, because you can have a denser use of containers, a denser storage of containers and move more throughput on this amount of square footage, and that it's very common to see way more throughput on this size facility. So it's not the size that's limiting it, it's the nature of the kind of infrastructure and the condition of the pier, and the fact that the operator has been operating on a string of 5-year extensions without any sort of long-term agreement that would incentivize them to invest as well. All of those things combined, we think, will allow it to get to it. So that was a long answer, but it's a great question, and I think it's at the core of what we're doing here, so I want to spend time on it. But the core question here is that we started with was, can this currently non-financial viable port be turned into a financially viable port? And based on our analysis, we believe the answer is yes. The next question is, in order to do that, what does it take? Does it take expanding to the 420 acres? The answer to that question was no. And the next question was, okay, so we've got 60 acres that we think is needed for this port. We've got 60 acres-ish left over minus the container, the cruise terminal, which is about 12 acres. So we've got 35, 40 acres that are not being used for that. We've got a housing crisis. We want to generate the highest and best use of that land to help be as maximally effective to the issues that we have here in New York City to reduce unaffordability, to increase affordability, I should say. And so that's how we want our route to define that. Thank you.
What are some examples of services? You said if there's like 2 or 3 services, if we can get 3 or 4, that'd be great.
So a service is defined as a ship that regularly calls on this port. So right now, there are 2 services that come in. One is Albany, and the other is Seaboard. One of them mostly focuses on timber, and one of them is mostly focused on produce.
And then also I remember from one of the hearings where Alexa pretty much phrased that, this was one of the hearings downtown somewhere, she phrased it that because we inherited the trade with the state, that it was had decades worth of deferred maintenance, that we pretty much got a bad deal. So I think that's part of what is really concerning of using real estate to fund a deal and now scrambling to get funding for something that essentially, and then this project is being run by the state also, so New York City residents are being asked to foot the bill that the state has been deferring for decades. So that's, I just want to maybe
just to clarify, the deferred maintenance was the Port Authority, and
which is run by the state, right?
The Port Authority is by state. New Jersey and New York together. So it's a different governing structure. The state has obviously stopping it, but it's not a state-controlled exclusively agency. And the process that we're going through is the GPP process. But that is not a process that is a process that was decided upon because of the nature of the kind of trade of ports that was happening as a state wanted to have.
I just want to echo what you're saying, housing, that is a really
that's when we lost
urgent topic right now, that we have a housing crisis. There is housing in New York, so I just want, and the fact that we have 40% that's being kind of shown to us is here's this great thing we're presenting to you, but that was advocated for by city council members and Reynoso and such. So I just want to make sure that that's also being communicated as we have these.
The only comment on that is we had both the Board of Housing crisis and the general housing crisis.
What was that? Sorry. Just in terms of using housing to pay for public infrastructure that.
There's a microphone. Can I ask one last question?
One more question.
Last question, and then thank you all.
Yes, I'm trying to understand why you guys are making a decision about this project in isolation with regards to housing, as opposed to allowing the city planning commission to make a major decision about housing and where that revenue that you need to fund this port. And I think you guys are doing a great job on that. But the housing seems out of place. That seems to be a decision that the city should make more broadly, because there is other places to build. And if we are going to put housing on this land, why are we not going to sell it for the highest price so we can get the most affordable housing we can as a city? And when you guys answer my question, if you're only looking at this site, That means that you can't take into consideration that right across the street from you guys is, M1 property, which can't be developed for residential use. But it's literally across the street from you. But that's the city planning commission can. So why not just make an alternate plan which says, I need $1.5 billion to make a self-funded port and leave the housing out of it, and let the city decide what this goes.
So thank you for that question. I think it's a good question to wrap up with. So I'll say a couple of things. Number one is that the nature of the housing crisis that we're in right now is not the type of we're not in a housing shortage where we can say, oh, just use these sets over here and then everything else can be decided later. The level of housing that's needed is a yes and type of thing. So we need to do this, I believe, in order to do it, and we also need to do all the build housing on all the other sites that you're referring to. I would say it's all those things. The other thing I want to point out is we have been in touch with the City Planning Commission throughout this process, and more formally and more directly in answer to your question, as part of the EIS process and the GPP process, there's an explicit step in that process where the City Planning Commission reviews the plan and approves it and signs off on it. Well, it hasn't been time for them to do that yet, because it's part of the EIS process. But we have been in touch with them during all the task force process, and they are on board with this plan as well. They believe that this is an important addition to the housing stock, in addition to all of the other housing strategies that you're taking. So with that, I'll say thank you all.
Why haven't you pursued the billions of dollars in funding that the EDC and the state was able to get for the Lower East Side waterfront, where they built flood resiliency incorporated into public access to the one-of-a-kind waterfront? Same thing with Battery Park City.
I'm happy that I think we have to let everyone know, and I'm happy to talk to you about that after the closed session afterwards. But thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. No, thank you, nothing. Shit is bullshit. It's a waste of time, is really what it is. Huh?